Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday, and there's an epic tag series that's going on. Jim, at Jim's Books and Reading and Stuff, is doing an alphabet tag, A through Z, and it's a great deal of fun. I've done them all, and we are all the way up to R. And we're doing the R tag today. I'll leave a link to Jim's original video. And all the prompts are R related. I've got the iPad right here. Number one is R is for reading. Why do you love reading? And this, of course, is a series of videos all by itself, right? This is one of the foremost, first, and hardest questions that any booktuber ever gets asked. It's right there in the BookTube newbie tag. Why do you love reading? And I've heard every answer. I've watched a million BookTube newbie tags, and I don't know that it boils down to any one particular thing, but several themes run in common for people's answers to this question. And one of those themes is that it adds to you. It makes you bigger on the inside than you are on the outside, to go all TARDIS-y on you. It adds to the dimension, to your dimensions as a person, to add all of these experiences and these amazing accounts from other people. And I certainly agree with that. I often reference C.S. Lewis's point about how we may admire our non-bookish friend in a whole bunch of different ways, but we wouldn't want to live in their tiny little life. We prefer the much bigger, more multidimensional life that we have if we read. But one of the reasons that I love reading that always comes up in my mind, I always feel like it's a little bit of a letdown to say, is how much fun it is. It's just so much fun to slip away from reality so easily. It's not a question of getting a quantum field generator and going to an alternate dimension. It's the easiest thing in the world to escape from everything. That is just so much fun. Even if the escape isn't particularly enjoyable, the act of doing it is still really fun. Non-readers I say this all the time, but they just don't know what they're missing. They just don't know what they're missing. It's just so much fun on so many levels. Of course, for me, there's an added element because I'm a professional critic. So in addition to the really humbly appreciating the way reading expands me, and in addition to that the fun of slipping away, escaping into a book, we use that phrase. In addition to all of that, for me, there's also the huntsman's horn that sounds when I start a brand new book, a new or forthcoming book, something that I may be reviewing for an audience. There's also that high-pitched horn note on a cold, misty morning in the English countryside when a fox hunt has just begun. No matter what you think about the ethics of fox hunting, a thrill goes through the whole crowd when that horn note is sounded, and I feel that way when I start a new book. Because I'm going to be assessing it. I'm not just going to be escaping into it, I'm going to be assessing it for the record. And that's a terrific feeling. So all of those, but mainly I think the thing is fun. For me, it's fun. I didn't think that at first. I wasn't unlike a lot of you, I was not a reader at first. I came to reading late. I envy all of you who say that your earliest memories are of reading. Even before you knew what the words meant, you were still mimicking the gesture of reading. To me, that is both charming and so enviable. But once I did come to reading, I didn't believe any of these claims until one particularly passionate reader introduced me to them. I didn't believe any of these claims until then, but once I started doing it, I realized how much fun it is. So I could give many, many reasons for why I love reading, but I'm going to stick with that one, which I often don't say because it feels somehow lowbrow. I love it because it's fun. It's one of the most fun, regularly, reliably fun things to do. Next prompt is R is for Russia. Who is your favorite Russian writer? And again, I'm going to have to say Tolstoy. I know that there are lots of other great ones. There's something in the water over there in Russia. They have a tendency for great literature, but nothing for me does it more than War and Peace, and that's Tolstoy. I'm not isolating that. I'm not meaning to isolate that alone. There's a lot of Tolstoy that works for me that way. I'm incredibly moved by long passages of Anna Karenina, for instance, and I think I might be one of the only people in the English-speaking world who actually likes resurrection. but War and Peace, a whole nother level for me. So I'm going to say Tolstoy. Then R is for romance. What is your favorite romantic novel? I think I have a picture. Yes, there we go. Accidentally in Love by K.L. Hires. This is a sucker for love mystery. It's a gay mystery about an attractive young himbo who meets a cute guy at a party. In the very first book, the series has gone on. In the first book, he meets a cute guy at a party, and they seem to hit it off. And then the cute guy shows up the next day and says, "I'm not the cute guy you met at the party. I'm actually a formless, tentacled elder god, a Lovecraftian elder god, who's inhabiting that cute guy's body." And the main character wants to know, well, what on earth? Why would you do that? And the god in the hottie says, well, the hottie was murdered, and I want you to solve the crime. I want you to solve my murder. And that's fun enough on its own grounds. But I love what I would have to call the world building here. I mean, this is a sudsy gay romance, but there's a lot of world building here. This takes place in a world that is just like our world, except that there's one established religion, and it's not Christianity. And there is a recognized, established, but socially despised alternate religion, an older religion, the old gods, the old ways. And there's a kind of registered magic that goes along with that. Our main character was raised in that older religion, and he has to sort of awkwardly downplay it with his friends. He has to keep it out of his official life, his official job. And all of a sudden, he is meeting, working for, and then, to the extent that tentacles will allow, shacking up with an elder god. I loved it a lot more than I thought it would. I thought that it would be cheesy and dumb, and that by the time I got to the end of, for instance, the sample, I downloaded a sample from Amazon first. As I do, I download a lot of samples from Amazon, send them to either my iPad or my Kindle, and read them. And I use a strict rule of thumb for Amazon samples. If I get to the end of the sample and I very much want to keep reading, you know that feeling, right? Where you get to the end, let's say, of a chapter, and you very much, nothing could stop you, basically, from reading the next chapter of any kind of book, under any circumstances. You've all felt that. If I get to the end of an Amazon sample and I feel that way, I buy the book. The author has done their job. The author has done everything I want them to do. And now they need my money. It's as simple as that. It's just as basic a transaction as it gets. If I'm doing that, if that's what's happening, then I buy the book. I instantly bought the book when I got to the end of this sample and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was expecting it to be a trifle, and it was. It's funny, first of all. It has a very practiced sense of humor, but it's also really enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. So I'm not saying that it's my favorite romance novel ever, but it's on my mind. It's on my mind, so I thought I would bring it up. Accidentally in love. Then the next prompt here is R is for Renoir. Do you have a favorite Renoir painting? For me, there's a portrait of Eugene Murray, M-U-R-E-R. Murray. It's a portrait. It's at the Met, and I've always been struck by, the stereotypical thing that people say about portrait paintings, that the eyes follow you around the room, and that is a well diagnosed, a well understood mental trick of looking at portrait paintings or paintings with eyes in them. And I discounted it completely until I saw this painting. And there's something about the eyes in this painting that they just, I don't know quite what it is. I think I could probably analyze it on one level. On just a mechanical level, I could probably analyze that Renoir was deliberately trying to slightly wash out the colors in the immediate environment of the eyes so that they would stick out. However he did it, it definitely works. That always sticks out for me. That's the one I think of when I think of this painter. Then R is for Regency. Do you have a favorite book written in the Regency period? That's 1811 to 1820, when the Prince Regent was in charge of England. Other than Jane Austen. So what Jim is saying here is that Pride and Prejudice and a lot of other Jane Austen was written during the Regency period, and that would otherwise take the palm. Do you have something that you love that was written at the same time that isn't Jane Austen? And a whole bunch of things came to mind for me, including Ivanhoe. Sir Walter Scott was writing some of his great novels during the Regency period, and they're forgotten now. No one cares about them. But Ivanhoe is absolutely terrific. It's absolutely terrific. That came to mind and wanted to push itself right to the front. But this may be controversial, but I think that period, what were the dates again? 1811 to 1820, has one work of writing in it that is toweringly better than anything else that was written in that period, including Pride and Prejudice. It's just toweringly better than anything else, and that's the Odes of John Keats. I don't think there's a close second. I mean, my own beloved Lord Byron was writing some of his poems. Corsair came out, I think, in this time period. And there were a whole bunch of other things too, but the Odes of Keats they're in a class by themselves. So I'm going to say with one guilty eye pointed at Ivanhoe, I'm going to say the Odes of John Keats. Then R is for roman à clef. Tell us about a roman à clef you like. I don't tend to like them. To me, they tend to be boring. The very nature of these things is that they are predictable. So I don't know one off the top of my head that I could say I conspicuously loved. So I'm just going to move on. R is for Rustaveli, the most revered Georgian writer. Here, Jim is referring to the country of Georgia, not to my adopted spirit state of the state of Georgia, the Peach State. Have you heard of him? I have heard of him. I've never read anything by this author. I'm curious to know now, off the top of my head, what kind of mainstream access English language translations there have been of Rustaveli. Penguin's never done him. Oxford's never done him. I don't think Yale or Princeton or anything like that. I don't know that he has a popular edition in English. I don't think I've ever encountered one. And I've worked in a retail bookstore carefully studying the new releases for many, many years, and I've also been a book reviewer for many, many years. I think I'd have seen such a thing. So I'm not sure how much of an effort is being made to get this Georgian writer out to the non-Georgian world. But I've heard of the writer. I've not read him. I certainly don't know him well. I don't know his work well. It's a whole world that I could explore. Then the last prompt is a little different. It's not the last prompt. There are extra prompts as well, and again, I expect you to do them. Imagine you were in an isolated log cabin with no internet and no Kindle. In the cabin, there are books by the following writers beginning with R. Racine, the French poet, or the French playwright, Kathy Reichs, Anne Rice, Ian Rankin, Ruth Rendell, Arundhati Roy, J.K. Rowling, and Salman Rushdie. Whose books would you read first, and whose would you leave to last? You can also rank the authors if you so wish by your personal preference. And I don't know whose I would read first. It would depend on the mood. But I couldn't resist the opportunity to rank the authors. For me, it would be Arundhati Roy. Then Ruth Rendell, boy oh boy, it's not until you go back to Ruth Rendell's enormous catalog and read a few of her books one after the other without slipping anybody else in between that you start to realize what a seriously good author this is. These are murder mysteries. She wrote 2 a year, and they're much, much better than you remember, and they're better than they have a right to be. She could probably have sold just as many books without putting so much work in. I'm very happy that I got back into the reviewing world in time enough to review one of her new releases. I reviewed Portobello Road, I think. I reviewed Portobello Road or Rottweiler or Tiger Lily. I reviewed a later novel, and I forget who I did it for now. I think it was the Washington Post. And I'm grateful for that, but it gave me a chance. I thought, yeah, okay, they want you to review a Ruth Rendell. Okay, well, you know what that is. But that forced me to read a few of her books, and then over the years, since then I have reread a lot of her books, and thankfully, I'm glad that I did that because it changed my estimation of her. She's really, really good. Then Anne Rice. Anne Rice can be hit or miss. Lately, she is mostly miss. But when her novels are not great literature, but when they're on, they're really on. They're really on. In fact, in keeping with the R tag, Ramses the Damned is a terrifically effective novel that I think has had a couple of sequels that I haven't read. I think one sequel to Ramses the Damned is coming out soon, in October, I think, that Anne Rice is writing with her son. I'll have to look into that. But then Ian Rankin, I'm not as big a fan of Ian Rankin as his super fans are, but I really like him. I think he's really, really good. Salman Rushdie, same thing. Salman Rushdie, I'm sure he is assured of a place in the literary memory, if not the literary canon. He won't be in the literary canon because he was heterosexual and a man. But at least in literary memory, I'm sure that he has assured himself the position of a major author. And that hasn't always worked for me. Sometimes I have read books that are considered major by him and found them to be just incomprehensibly bad, just really, really, really bad. And others of his that I have really, really loved. So I don't write him off, but he's an acquired taste I haven't completely acquired. Same thing with Racine, who would be next. I know that Racine is a genius. I know that people revere him, study him, spend their whole lives studying him. Maybe it's just the English language translations that I've read of him, although I've read him in French, and I don't see it. I don't see the towering genius in the way that I'm told. I've had many a reader over the years ago rather than more recently, tell me without any hint of irony that they consider him to be Shakespeare's superior. I don't think that's even remotely true. So I don't know about that. Then Reichs and Rowling would finish up the list here because I don't really like either author. I don't think either one of them is particularly good. And then we have the bonus prompts. R is for robot. Do you have a favorite book about robots? I just read one that I can really recommend if you see it in your bookstore. It's brand new. I think it's out this month. It's called Rule of the Robots by Martin Ford. And it's about robots and AI. It's not fiction. There is no call for anybody to read fiction about robots. Robots are coming now. They exist now. They're not fiction anymore. and as such, it behooves you to know them. It behooves you to understand them. Because they're here already. I'm sure you've seen video clips of dancing robots, video clips of police robot dogs. Your eye, the first minute that you see a video clip like that, your eye says, "I'm looking at CGI," and you're not. You're looking at something real, something that's actually happening. And they have external controllers, human controllers, who are telling them what to do, but they don't need those. They don't need them. It would be easy to write some sort of recursive instructions so the thing could teach itself, move itself, decide on its own where it wants to go. And it's not like these things are purely theoretical. Amazon has an entire wing of their R&D that's entirely devoted to the mass production and the mass dissemination of delivery robots. They don't quite know what form they want those to take. A lot of advocates at that particular branch of Amazon want these delivery robots to be delivery dogs, about the size of a big Rottweiler, and with a huge open compartment in the inside of the body. The rest of it is not hackable. It's not tamperable. And it has self-defense mechanisms and all sorts of internal and external cameras. So they want to safeguard it against someone just taking the thing. But it would have a delivery space on the inside. It would go and find you and deliver the things to you. But they're also considering. Briefly, they considered Amazon robots, humanoid robots, to deliver things. And I think that's been abandoned as just cost prohibitive. But lots of other things. These are on the minds of a whole bunch of developers, both with good intention and bad. Of course, robot dogs in the field. If you could field 10,000 of them, they don't ever get tired. They don't ever care about the weather. They don't need provisions. They can find you by your heat emissions. They can climb walls. They can carry a huge amount of ordnance without you worrying about heat prostration. I guarantee you, robots are in our immediate future, and Ford's book is terrific. So well worth the time. It's a recommend. Then R is for rhyme. Do you have a favorite nursery rhyme? I don't have a favorite nursery rhyme. I didn't have nursery rhymes when I was in the nursery. I had dogs instead. Dogs don't know poetry. Then the last R prompt here is R is for ranking. How would you rank the books you have read this year? Best, second best, and worst? Well, yes. Yes, that is the question, isn't it? And of course, I wouldn't waste your time by ranking things as best, second best, and worst. What good is a ranking that's only 3 books long? No, instead, at the end of every year, I offer my Steve Reads list of the best and worst books of that year in the 15 or 16 genres that I read. 10 books per list. 1 list per day, all throughout December until we run out of categories. Those categories are debut fiction, works in translation, fiction, nonfiction, history, biography, nature, science, kids, YA, mystery, romance, science fiction, and fantasy. There may be extra categories, miscellaneous, guilty pleasures, anything like that. There will also be worst fiction and worst nonfiction. 10 books on each list, coming out day after day after day. That happens in December. That happens every December. That is my Steve Reads Year's End Best and Worst Books of the Year list. It's absolutely definitive. I jokingly talk about that kind of definitiveness and everything else that I write, but when it comes to these lists, I mean it. It's actually true. These lists are definitive. They're not cobbled together from a whole bunch of people in a newspaper's book section who are all being heavily instructed by the advertising department of the same newspaper. They're not anything like that. No bandwagons, no nothing like that. Instead, it's just one person. I myself, in 2021, have read more books than all of the members of the Wall Street Journal's editorial of their book section. The Wall Street Journal has, I think, 4 or 5 book section editors, a book section main editor, and a whole bunch of reviewers. Put all of those people together, add them all together. In 2021 already, I have read more books than all of them put together. Same thing with the revered New York Times, which has editors for the magazine, it has editors for the weekly section, it has a bunch of sub-editors, it has a whole bunch of reviewers. Add them all together. Add all of them together. I have read more books already in 2021 than all of them. And you might say, well, it's quality, not quantity. But quantity plays a big deal. The quantity allows you to judge things in reference to other things. And it also allows you to know what's out there so that you know what you're talking about, as opposed to there's a book section editor at the New York Times book review, the most influential book review in the English-speaking world. There's an editor at that section who only reads 2 authors. If they don't have something new that year, he doesn't read anything. He rereads over scotch and makes pretentious tweets about it. Has a pretentious Substack about it. As far as new releases goes, he only reads 2 authors. In other words, when it comes time for him to be tapped at the end of the year, when the New York Times goes to him and said, hey, can you give us your nominee? Can you give us a couple of entries for the big, huge Books of the Times list that we have at the end of the year, that famous New York Times list? When they go to him and ask, can you give us your contribution? And then he does, his contribution is worthless. It is worthless. He is an anteater. He eats one thing only. He's a koala bear. It's useless to ask for a restaurant review from a koala bear. Then what are they going to say? They're going to say either the place didn't have eucalyptus leaves, or they're going to say the eucalyptus leaves were great. They don't have any idea what they're talking about. So, of course, that's one of those. They're going to say one of those 2 things. I am not. As you know from watching this channel, I am out there reading a lot every day in order to keep my nose right level with the water level. I haven't done that, of course. There's no way that anyone could. But I've done a lot more of it than any other entire book section of newspapers that will run year's best book lists without batting an eye. They'll run it even though they know that their reviewers and their editors combined have not experienced even half of the new releases out there in the genres they're writing about that I have. Which is a long way of answering this prompt by saying I will indeed rank the best and worst books that I've read this year in due time. I won't do it for this tag. I will do it in December. And it will be definitive. So in the meantime, what's the matter, baby? Huh? I think the rank egotism is bothering the bean. So I'm going to wrap this up. That was the R tag. We don't have many more of these before Jim gets to the end of the alphabet. That was the R tag. Again, as is always the case here with these alphabet tags, I tag you all to do it. Just definitely do all of these alphabet tags. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. And I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.